Your brand, Podetize. Boy, my collar's a mess. I am solo today. Tracy's unable to join, sort of a last minute thing, unfortunately. But I have a announcement right off the top before I get into recording our episode and our talking about our topic today, which is about Hooklines. It's going to be a lot of fun. So we Tracy decided about 2 weeks ago, because she has serious interest in AI. It's been all, for the last 6 months, everybody's been talking about ChatGPT and Bard and all these different tools. And, there's been sort of this feeding frenzy around AI, and a lot of interest and fun generated around it. Well, Tracy has been into AI for about 8 years, and we've been testing it here at Podetize for several years as well, using different AI tools. Use some in our production service, and others are coming and being integrated into our podcast hosting, portal and service for even DIY customers. And so Tracy's a bit of an authority on the application of AI, and decided there's such interest. She's starting and what we call an AI podcast lab, which is an interactive experience that's going to happen weekly starting Tuesday, June 13th. Now, there's a link that we're pasting here on the different social platforms. We can go to a landing page and learn about that. And if you're interested, you can sign up for it. And we're also posting it here live for our customers here on Zoom with us. Now, if you are a Podetize customer for the monetized level hosting, which is $99 a month, this is included, doesn't cost you anything. You're automatically going to receive a email. Oh, and that includes anybody who's set up their podcast and launched it within the last year, because you get hosting for that first year. So it doesn't cost you anything. You're going to be invited and given a link for where to just join. You have to register, or I think actually we're registering you. We're registering all of our customers who are appropriate, but you're going to get a link where you can join. So it's next Tuesday, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. And it'll be happening weekly. So the idea is Tracy's going to go over one particular AI tool, tip, service and thing that you can try. She will demonstrate and give some, direction, recommendations. But the idea is you try it out, experiment yourself over the course of the week. And then the following Tuesday, everybody gets together, reviews, shares experiences, the good, the bad, everything in between. And then the third week, there'll be another new tool. So it's a cooperative, collaborative experience done with you. This is not just a, lecture, webinar, seminar where she's just pushing information to you. This is meant to explore things together. And Tracy's got enough topics, enough different tools to do this for a year. That's what she's planning to do it weekly for the next year. So, and it's a new environment within Zoom. We've upgraded our company Zoom, and there's, I guess, what they call a Zoom hub that you'll have access to. That's where you would get the lives, but it's also, if you can't be there live, it's where you go to get all the recordings. They're all organized and in one place, very easy, and only available for those that have either signed up or are already customers and who have been signed up. We've signed up for you. So it's open to anybody, though. You don't have to be working with Podetize previously to participate in this. But go check out the landing page. There's a video from Tracy with a little more detail about it, and sign up if you want to join. So that's it. A little announcement, little pitch. And now let's get to the podcast episode, which is about podcast marketing, crafting hook lines that engage and convert listeners. All right, here we go. Welcome to Feed Your Brand. I'm Tom Hazzard, and today I want to share with you some really important things to consider regarding your podcast if you're interested in having a hook line, or at least what we call a hook line, at the beginning of your show. So we're going to talk about crafting hook lines that engage and convert listeners. Now, I want to first start with a little definition of what is a hook line for those of you that may not know. And there are other terms people use for this. Sometimes people call it a cold open. We call it a hook line, and what it is the very first thing your listeners hear at the beginning of your podcast episode is a little audio clip from within the episode. Now, it doesn't matter if this is a solo cast or it's an interview episode. I think most often it's done with interview episodes, and it's usually a clip of something the guest says. And the intent is for it to give a little tease, a little preview of what's coming in the episode, and to get people excited and in the right frame of mind and wanting to listen through the whole thing. If it's a tease or it's building anticipation, that's a particularly good thing. Because then people are like, oh wow, I gotta hear the rest of that story, right? And they then are set up and wanting to listen. However, there's a lot of pros and cons. I want to talk about some of that first, and then get into what makes a good hook line. And especially toward the end, I want to put what makes deciding on the right hook line challenging. Because I'll tell you, there's a reason why, at least in our experience, less than probably 4 or 5% of shows we produce actually use a hook line. Some do and have done it their entire existence and do it very well. Most don't. And I think when you learn a little bit about, why that number will make some sense to you, it might not be so shocking. So let's talk about, some pros and cons about hook lines. The first thing is, the very first thing your listeners are going to hear is out of context, and it's not often it's not a familiar voice, especially if it's the guest, because every episode you might have a different guest and it's a voice the listeners never heard before. It's not your voice necessarily. It's not familiar to them. They haven't heard your pre-recorded intro with your music and your voiceover that they're used to, at least not yet. Because usually, like I said, the idea is it's the very first thing people hear. Now, you could do it differently. You can have your pre-recorded intro and then have a hook line. But the idea here is to give your audience something new, something engaging, something that builds curiosity right up front. First thing they hear. And then it gets them to be like, whoa, that's, an engaging, quote that got their attention, and, out of context, and can be a bad thing, but can be a good thing because it makes people think, where did that come from? Or what's the rest of that story? And then they want to go listen to the rest. But the bad thing is they don't hear your voice right from the beginning, and they don't hear a familiar intro. And if the hook line is too long, and this is a common mistake people make when they choose a hook line, is they choose a very long hook line. And people are like, well, wait a second, what is this? If it's a minute long, I think that's way too long. And people are, hearing this other person. Maybe you interject to hear your voice briefly, but oftentimes not. And they're like, did I turn on the right show? Did I click the right one? Or is there a problem with the app? I mean, it can cause confusion and problems. So that to me is the con, or the downside, if you will, of using a hook line, is there's a lack of familiarity in the beginning of every one of your episodes. So here's recommendation number one. When you have a hook line, yes, needs to be a good one, but I recommend short and sweet. 15 seconds, 20 seconds, maybe max would be my personal goal. That may not always happen, and certainly there's no absolute rule. If you've got an amazing, soundbite that's 30 seconds long, you certainly can use it. But when it gets to be a minute or longer, that I do hear some people on other shows do, I'm like, whoa, you're really risking things here. You're going to lose your audience, and before you even get the show started. But short and sweet, then you have your pre-recorded intro and people are like, "Whoa, wow, that's great. Okay, yeah, now I'm familiar. I'm getting comfortable." And wow, I don't really know who this. That's the other thing. They don't necessarily know who it is in the hook line. Sort of another downside to the hook line is you haven't introduced that guest, and if it's not you, the host with the hook line, that's completely a new voice. People don't know who it is. And why should they listen? Why should they care? So that's why the importance of the hook line and what it says, and does it, stir some emotion really quickly? Is it piquing curiosity? Is it helping to warm people up for what's coming? You want to make sure, you want to think about these goals in mind when you choose a hook line. It's kind of like that appetizer, a little taste, a first listen, and sets the tone for what the whole episode is about. So choosing one is a really I would say the degree of difficulty for that task of choosing the right hook line is pretty high. The importance of it is very high. And so herein lies one of the pitfalls of hook lines. And I'm not anti hook line. I'm really just trying to set realistic expectations for what's involved in choosing one. And also, I think this is going to start to help you realize why few shows do it. But choosing that hook line is so important. And if you're a do-it-yourself podcaster, that adds quite a bit of work to what you need to do. And if you're not a do-it-yourself podcaster, are you going to trust your podcast editor to choose that hook line? Are they capable of that? At Podetize, like I said, we got maybe 4 or 5% of our done for you production customers that use hook lines. Most of them have us choose them, but these are people we've been working with for mostly, several years or more, and they've developed a comfort level. In the very beginning, some of them were choosing the hook lines for us and giving us, here, use this quote for the hook line, taking all that time and consideration to figure it out themselves. And then, we learn sort of their preferences, their style, what kind of quotes they like, and then eventually choose them. But you've got to realize, whether we're producing your content or, you have another producer doing it, and you're not choosing that hook line yourself, your producer can't read your mind. They're never going to choose the exact soundbite that you would. It's highly unlikely. And this was one major important moment that's kind of obvious in that episode that makes sense to use. But usually it's a judgment call, right? So you either have to let go and trust your editor to do it, which I think is why a lot of people don't when they're not do-it-yourselfers. Or again, even if you're not a do-it-yourselfer, you can, take some notes. I often, we send our customers these pads for making notes while they're, in their episode, writing them down so they're not typing, hopefully, and, the keyboard sound isn't heard over the microphone. But if you can write down, oh, that was a really good quote or good soundbite, I might want to use that for the hook line. You can make some notes, and then you need to go back and listen and find it and provide that information. If not the exact timestamp, at least enough information, enough context that your editor can then find and use that clip as the soundbite. The old adage is really true. If you want something done right, you better do it yourself, or at least in the beginning, until your editor, your production company can learn, and you can end up, they can end up choosing a hook line that you're more likely to be happy with. One example show I can tell you all to check out, longtime show we've been producing for 4 or 5 at least years. It's called The Successful Pitch with John Livesey, and that show has a hook line every single episode at the beginning. Been doing it for years, and John is at that point of comfort level with us where he doesn't ever give us any information. He records his audio, uploads, and he's done. We do everything from there, including the hook line. And at this point, he never comes back with any concerns, questions, needs it changed. It's extraordinarily rare. If it happens once a year, I'd be shocked. So it can be done, and it can be done well. So, just want to set up some realistic expectations. Now, let's say you're comfortable spending the time yourself as a do-it-yourselfer, or you're willing to find that clip you want to use and provide it to your editor, which is going to make sure the result ends up, the outcome ends up exactly what you want it to be, which I think is very important, at least in the beginning. And now let's talk a little bit more about that clip, that hook line, and what, when I said in the beginning of this, the title of this episode is to convert listeners, right? Crafting hook lines that engage and convert. What does convert mean? I want to make sure I define that. Engage obviously means to get people's attention and to either, build curiosity or evoke a certain emotion. If you got somebody telling a story of some tragic crash in their life, and then, hopefully there's going to be the rise to victory or success or getting to a better place in life. Sometimes that crash can be something kind of shocking to get people's attention and evoke a certain emotion. It was like, whoa, like that's unbelievable. I gotta hear the rest of the story. You hear what I keep saying? I've got to hear the rest of the story is what I would be saying in my mind. So here is the conversion. The idea is, by the way, you want people to listen to your entire episode. This is the whole point, right? And sometimes when we have our episode format that's the same every time, it can become a little routine, even though people are subscribed and they come back and they're listening to you every time because they've come to like you, trust you, want to hear your message. You have the same pre-recorded intro, and maybe you haven't changed it in a few years. I mean, we recommend a lot of the time, considering every year, do you want to update your intro, freshen it up a little bit, and because people get in this kind of routine. And even, if you're listening to Feed Your Brand every week, you hear often I'm starting the show the exact same way. The first 15 seconds is probably the same every time. Not necessarily a good thing. It doesn't get people really excited. It is familiar to them. They're driving, they're listening to back-to-back episodes, and okay, yeah, the right episode played. This is the show I wanted to hear. That's a good thing. But the conversion, the idea here, when you're listening to a lot of shows back to back, or the same show week after week, and everything is the same in the beginning, while there's a comfort and familiarity with that, there's also not a lot of anticipation being built. There's not a lot of excitement being generated. And a hook line can do that if it's done really well. Build excitement, build anticipation, get the listener to be like, okay, I got to make sure I pay attention. And it's because podcasting can be kind of a passive activity while we're driving, while we're exercising, while we're walking or jogging, running. And people sometimes can listen a little too passively. So if you set up this hook from the beginning that gets, people to realize right up front, there's something different here, or there's something important here, or there's something controversial, shocking, or heartwarming story, whatever it is. If there is a clip, again, short and sweet is Tom's recommendation anyway, that really does that communicates that feeling, or, sets up that anticipation, and it's like, all right, I need to pay attention to this episode. I want to listen through this whole thing. Then you're going to get people listening all the way through your episode. So I also recommend this as a clip that's somewhere deep in the episode. Don't give, you're giving an appetizer at the beginning, a teaser. Don't make that something that happens in the first 10 minutes of a 40-minute episode. I recommend it's something that's pretty deep, more than halfway through, 2/3 of the way through or so. Now, obviously, this is a judgment call too. It can be very much toward the end and one of the last things people get, or it could be more halfway through. But point is, you want people to listen through to the whole thing. So don't give it away right up front, unless the episode continues to pay off in other ways and there's a reason why you want to set them up with something they're going to get kind of early, and then they're going to keep getting more. I mean, obviously I'm making some suggestions and you can do what's right for you, and you can experiment with this too. I mean, there's a trial and error factor here. You're welcome to do. Everybody, any podcaster who's been podcasting long enough pivots their show at some point in some way, and maybe multiple ways. And this can be one that you can try. Now, some people do interview episodes and solo casts, where they're speaking on a topic just on their own, kind of like I'm doing here today. And, a hook line in that situation may not really be that as important as it is in an interview episode, or maybe something you don't want to do unless it's an interview episode. I mean, that's a choice too, although you certainly could do it if you had a good hook line in a solo cast. So conversion is about playthrough. So I just want to make sure that's clear. And really, judgment calls are tough, right? These are all judgment calls about our shows that we make, decisions we make, who we're going to interview, what the main topic's going to be, what those opening question is going to be, and that actually brings up another concept for a hook line. If you want it to be your voice as the host every time, if you've got a really good question that is short enough to ask in that 15-second 20-second time frame, that can be another good idea for a hook line. Ask a question early on, but don't give the answer. Don't let the guest answer, or don't let them answer completely. Okay, because that can build a lot of anticipation. You ask a question and maybe you hear a little bit of the start of the answer, or maybe the guest kind of chuckles or is like, oh wow, that's a good question, or whatever. Don't let them give the answer. There's building anticipation, setting up the listener to be like, wait, you really teased me now. It's like, okay, that's a great question, you got me, I'm gonna listen. Right? So lots of different things you can do with a hook line, but again, fair warning, it's kind of advanced podcasting in terms of the amount of time and effort you, the host, are going to have to put in. And especially if you're editing your own, but even if you're not, the amount of time you are going to need to put in to communicate, here's where it is. You got that recording, you got to go through it, find that clip, give the timestamp to your editor, use this hook line, and until you get to a point where, if you are really hands off, kind of the way John Livesey is for the successful pitch, that you have enough faith and trust in your editing and production team that they'll choose a good hook line for you. And that's really where Johnson is. He's kind of, hands off at this point. And gosh, so many years later, he's like 300 plus or more episodes in. And he's not going to spend that kind of time. He's focusing his effort on getting those great guests, what questions he's going to ask, and he's leaving all those editorial and production decisions up to us. And we've gotten to a point where it works for him and he's happy with it. So just be aware of those things, and think about, what could you do in your podcast that would be a way to choose a hook line, put it up front, that really has a big impact, that's going to be that wow moment. Remember, you want to wake someone up. I'm driving from LA to Vegas, I'm listening to 8 or 10 podcasts back to back. What are you going to do to get my attention? Right? And make it make your content exciting, get people in that right mood, listen to the whole thing, serves them better, serves you and your purposes. So there you go. I hope that was very helpful. If you have any thoughts or comments, you can reach out to us at podetize.com. And of course, you can find the blog post for this episode and all others. Also at podetize.com, there is a feed your brand page. And once you click in any one of the blogs, you can search on any titles, topics, subjects you're interested in, find a episode appropriate for that, and hopefully get some good value out of that. So I hope you do that. And we look forward to being back next time with another great episode. Until then, this is Tom Hazzard signing off for Feed Your Brand. Okay, let's see. No questions. There was just some links you were posting. Okay, cool. All right, everyone. Thanks for being here live. Any thoughts, questions, comments, feel free. Now's the time. Oh, and I guess for those of you watching the streaming, this is the end of our stream. If you are a Podetize customer, and you want to participate in the Q&A, which we do following that live episode recording for another usually half hour or so now, you need to join in the live Zoom webinar. So I'm gonna sign off the streaming now. And if you weren't watching up front, make sure you see the beginning of this recording so you can learn about our podcast AI lab that starts next Tuesday, the 13th. So, and that's just podetize.com/podcast. I think, what is it? AI-podcast-lab. Yeah, AI-podcast-lab should be a link in the, on the social media channels where this has been playing. So check that out.